Continuing debate. I believe I have a point of order from the Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Still remember.
Madam Speaker, I'm rising on a question of privilege concerning the 12th report of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics following the notice that I gave you earlier today after the report was tabled. And so here we go again, Madam Speaker. And because the time of the House is valuable, I've prepared concise remarks. And we find ourselves dealing again, though, with another witness showing blatant disregard for another committee. Earlier this year, we dealt with the woes of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates when Christian Firth, the key contractor in the Liberals' Arrive scam. Now, today we have the Ethics Committee's challenges with the Employment Minister's sketchy business partner, Stephen Anderson. Now, recognizing, Madam Speaker, there's significant overlap between the two cases, and that you listened very carefully to my detailed submission on Mr. Firth less than 6 months ago. I'm going to refer you to the authorities cited in my March 20th arguments on the failure of a witness to answer questions and adopt them for the present purpose. That said, there are some key points to emphasize and some differences between the two cases noted. Now, while Mr. Firth dodged and weaved questions as a witness, Mr. Anderson both did that and he defied document production orders. Now, since this has been a dizzying file, even for those of us who have followed it carefully, because there have been so many carefully scripted denials, which are then smashed to bits by yet more bombshell revelations, a brief chronology might be in order. And I'm sure that my honourable colleagues are going to be very interested in this chronology. This spring, Global News broke an explosive story about questionable business dealings, ethics and lobbying centred around the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages and his recent business associates. Now, understandably, the Ethics Committee wanted to get to the bottom of the issue on May 7th, agreed to invite the Minister and the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner to appear as witnesses at that committee. On June the 4th, Global News reported on text messages, which it had obtained, showing that Mr. Anderson had written that, quote, Randy told him to, quote, be available in 15 for a partner call. Now, after the minister's appearance that day, where he denied being the Randy in question, the committee agreed on June 11th to extend the study by inviting the minister's business associates, including Mr. Anderson, as witnesses. The committee also adopted a document production order directed to the minister and Mr. Anderson for all, quote, phone records, text messages, iMessages, and all instant messages and call logs from all applications from September 8, 2022, end quote, to be produced within 7 days. Now, on June 18th, the committee re-invited Mr. Anderson to appear during the week of July the 15th. On July 17th, Mr. Anderson did appear as a witness and trifled with the committee in his answers. A central area of concern was the identity of the so-called other Randy. In the September 8 text messages, and as it would turn out, several others sent the same week, Mr. Anderson blamed an autocorrect, which struck no less than 9 times and claimed that he could only provide the real name in camera in secret. Now, the committee disagreed. By the end of that meeting, the committee unanimously agreed to, quote, order Stephen Anderson to produce all of the previously requested documents in addition to the name referenced in today's testimony, and if those documents are not received by Friday, July the 19th, at 12 p.m., the chair prepare a report to the House outlining the question that Stephen Anderson refused to answer in writing and during testimony, end quote. Excuse me. Mr. Anderson failed to provide that information, Madam Speaker, including the supposed identity of the infamous other Randy, though he did provide a bunch of other documents which were unresponsive to the Ethics Committee's orders. So here we are, Madam Speaker. While I think we've all lost track of the Ethics Commissioner's revolving door of an investigation into that minister, it is patently clear that Mr. Anderson failed to answer questions and he failed to produce records required by the Ethics Committee. Now, I'll also add that there are concerns about the truthfulness of some of the testimony from Mr. Anderson, which may well be a matter for a future report from the committee. Indeed, he freely admitted to the committee that he had lied to Global News. So that much is certain. For today's purposes, we are, of course, concerned with Mr. Anderson's refusal to provide information. Now, your predecessor ruled on May 11, 2021, on page 7021 of the debates about the role of committees in questions of privilege concerning witnesses' evidence, and held that committees must first do the work of considering the issue and then inform the House of their conclusion. Well, that part, Madam Speaker, well, it's now done. House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition at page 82, borrowing from a list of established contempts laid out in the 1999 report from the United Kingdom's Parliament's Joint Committee on Parliamentary Privilege, enumerates established areas of contempt, including, quote, engaging in other misconduct in the presence of the House or a committee without reasonable excuse, refusing to answer a question or provide information or produce papers formally required by the House or a committee, and without reasonable excuse, disobeying a lawful order of the House or a committee, end quote. So during his July 17th testimony, Mr. Anderson was asked, but failed or refused to name the so-called other Randy, or otherwise protested that he could only provide that information in camera about 10 times. Now, I asked him. The honourable member for Brantford Brant asked him. The honourable member from Hamilton Centre did too. Even the honourable member for Ottawa Centre tried and got stonewalled. Now, the honourable member for Steveston Richmond East asked Mr. Anderson if he would provide the answer in writing, and Mr. Anderson agreed. Then he resiled from his agreement when the member for Ottawa Centre followed up with his own questions. So the committee then deliberated on whether to yield to Mr. Anderson's demands and sit in camera. The committee decided not to, but instead adopted the order for him to furnish written responses that he had once offered to provide. Madam Speaker, no answer from Mr. Anderson has been received to date, and certainly not before the committee's deadline of July the 19th. I'll note for you that it's September the 17th. In fact, the Liberal Employment Minister's sketchy business partner did not provide responsive records concerning the balance of that document production order or the committee's original June 11th order either. In adopting these orders, the committee was exercising its authority, which Boskin Gagnon described at pages 983 and 984 as follows, quote, the standing orders state that standing committees have the power to order the production of papers, records, another privilege that is rooted in the Constitution and which is delegated by the House. In carrying out their responsibility to conduct studies and inquiries, standing committees often have to rely on a wide array of papers to aid them in their work. The standing orders do not delimit the power to order the production of papers and records. The result is broad, absolute power that on the surface appears to be without restriction. There is no limit on the types of papers likely to be requested. The only prerequisite is that the papers exist in hard copy or electronic format and that they are located in Canada. They can be papers originating from or in the possession of government, or papers the authors or owners of which are from the private sector or civil society, individuals, associations, organizations, etc. End quote. Boskin Gagnon, the immediate following passage gets to the heart of the Ethics Committee's current predicament. Quote, in practice, standing committees may encounter situations where the authors of or officials responsible for papers refuse to provide them or are willing to provide them only after certain portions have been removed. Companies may be reluctant to release papers which could jeopardize their industrial security or infringe upon their legal obligations, particularly with regard to the protection of personal information. These types of situations have absolutely no bearing on the power of committees to order the production of papers and records. The House has never set a limit on its powers to order the production of papers and records. However, it may not be appropriate to insist on the production of papers and records in all cases. In cases, the quote continues, in cases where the author of or the authority responsible for a record refuses to comply with an order issued by a committee to produce documents, the committee essentially has three options. The first is to accept the reasons and conditions put forward to justify the refusal. The committee members then concede that they will not have access to the record or accept the record with passages deleted. The second is to seek an acceptable compromise with the author or the authority responsible for access to the record. Now, normally this entails putting measures in place to ensure that the record is kept confidential while it is being consulted. These include in-camera review, limited and numbered copies, arrangements for disposing of or destroying the copies after the committee meeting, etc. The third option is to reject the reason given for denying access to the record and uphold the order to produce the entire record, end quote. Now, in Mr. Anderson's case, I believe it's fair to say that the Ethics Committee, in the end, attempted to reach a compromise, one which Mr. Anderson had initially at least agreed to get his answer about the identity of the so-called other Randy. Now, with respect to the balance of the documents which had not been produced in response to the June 11th order, Mr. Anderson raised objections, which he vocalized during his July 17th appearing. In response, the committee renewed its order. As such, it's fair to say that the committee chose the third option, rejecting his reasons and insisting on full production, as is its right. That leaves us with the situation which Bosque and Gagnon describes at page 138. I quote, "If a committee's request that it be given certain documents is met with resistance or disregarded, the committee may adopt a motion ordering the production of the requested documents. If such an order is ignored, the committee has no means to enforce the order on its own. It may report the matter to the House and recommend that appropriate action be taken," end quote. Well, the House is now fully up to speed on the matter and appropriate action is being sought. That brings me, Madam Speaker, to the point where I say that if you agree there's a prima facie contempt, that I'm prepared to move an appropriate motion. Now, I won't keep the House in suspense. Like in the case of Mr. Firth, I intend to move a motion that would find Mr. Anderson in contempt and order his attendance at the bar to be admonished and to answer questions. Now, this motion would also incorporate the unanimously negotiated and agreed procedures for questioning Mr. Firth. One addition would be to include a requirement for Mr. Anderson to deliver up the as yet unproduced records. Now, as you said in your March 22nd, 2024 ruling at page 21,946 of the debates, quote, "While it is perhaps true that the suggested remedy is not something we've seen for some time, I am of the view that it is procedurally in order. As with the case from June 2021, the motion provides for a call to the bar in order to be reprimanded and a specific remedy to the offense," end quote. We must all recall that this House is possessed with truly awesome power and authority to vindicate its role as the grand inquest of the nation. Citations 123 to 125 of Beauchene's Parliamentary Rules and Forms 6th edition elaborates, quote, "Privilege grants considerable punitive powers to the House of Commons. The mildest form of punishment is a simple declaration that an act or an article is a breach of privilege. When an individual has been present at the bar, it has been customary to deliver this conclusion to the culprit in the presence of the House. On such occasions, censure of the individual is usually added to the conclusion that the privilege has been offended. Occasionally, the individual at the bar will be given an opportunity to purge the contempt and promise better conduct in the future. For more serious contempts, the House may proceed further," end quote. Now, in my March arguments, I quoted extensively from the 1993 to 2013 reports of the United Kingdom's Joint Committee on Parliamentary Privilege about the need for Parliament to find institutional confidence necessary to vindicate its authority and impose sanctions in cases of breach, lest accountability to Parliament be reduced to a pious aspiration and institutional weakness cynically exposed. Now, in the end, the House rose to the challenge and unanimously agreed to sanction Mr. Firth, despite some subsequent weak knees and queasy stomachs from some honourable members. But I trust, Madam Speaker, that the House won't start giving out free passes to those who think they can trifle at will with Parliament and parliamentary investigations. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, the 12th report of the Ethics Committee outlines, I respectfully submit, a contempt of Parliament committed by the Liberal Employment Minister's sketchy business partner, Stephen Anderson. Parliament deserves to know just who the other Randy is. All Canadians, and especially those in Edmonton Centre, deserve that answer, and we must get that answer. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for submitting the motion, and we will take it under advisement.